Hello there, Seraphim17 once again. This is my Battlefield 4 hard difficulty video walkthrough. This is being played on the PC. It is not the project I thought I would be presenting to you, but one has to make do with the situation that they're in. And it was one of the games that was on my hard drive during a internet drought that I'm currently suffering. And it begins right here, as we have to protect Irish and shoot some people with this delightful scar and a holographic. So the more eagle-eyed viewers of my playlist will know I've covered this game before. I covered this game when it was new on console. And if you want to see a conventional walkthrough of this game, you can go and check that one out. Go and see where we've come and how far we've made it on the channel. But if you want to see a more concise, super cut together sequence of all the encounters where danger can be incurred, this will be the more expedient project for you to enjoy. And of course it's going to be a lot prettier and a lot fluider and hopefully a lot more interesting to watch. Battlefield 4 as a whole is not a very difficult game, but it does have a couple of situations where you can struggle. This first level here, Baku, is probably not one of them. It's more of an introduction more than anything. And there are a couple of mechanics that you're going to be seeing here which I'm going to swiftly touch over before I completely forget to. And you saw it just then. When you attack people in Battlefield 4's campaign, there are points rewards for what you do. And I think this is a really wonderful mechanic and something that almost every game should have. It's a score system that enables you to replay the campaign and try and beat your score and do more interesting things. And I don't think it's the most in-depth or developed system, but there's enough going on there for it to be quite unique and to stand out. And if you reach certain metrics, you will either get a bronze, a silver, or a gold. And depending on those rewarding structures will depend on what you get. And they enable you to get access to weapons that you wouldn't be able to touch if you hadn't gone for the scores. And most of the scores are lenient enough that you will get them by accident without really trying or having to learn any kind of augmented way to score better. The sequence here is a decent one for points, as you get 125 per execution. The only problem here is you don't seem to be able to chain these guys together for a multi-kill. And if scoring was something that you wanted to get into, destroying vehicles and squad wiping and getting those multi-kills would definitely be really helpful too, because it does augment the points and it seems to multiply them in some way. So I'm going to try my best to swap weapons a decent amount so I can show you some of the arsenal of Battlefield 4. This game is 10 years old now. It's kind of interesting how well it's aged, isn't it? Especially if you're a multiplayer guy. The multiplayer side of Battlefield 4 is really, really strong. There's people still playing on those locker servers and really getting into some mischief with those ridiculous warfare that happens. I'm not a big Battlefield guy, as you know. Quite a sacrosanct Battlefield guy in many ways. It's one of those franchises, you know, everything that people seem to love I seem to not like so much. And the stuff that people seem to despise are the ones I seem to enjoy. I don't know if that's an outsider coming in or if that's just the polemic in me coming out. But this game, when it came out, was really impressive, and I still think it is, especially coming off of Battlefield 2042. One of the plus notes of covering a Battlefield game in 2022 right now is that we get to say, look at what used to happen when they gave a fuck. Look at what DICE can do when they're actually making a video game with the right people for the right reasons. And EA's not always getting in their way every waking moment. Because this game has a campaign. You're watching me play it right now. The new one doesn't have a campaign. They wanted to focus on what they do well, which is selling you broken, empty, shitty trailers. Which is just insulting. And right now, this is really bad because my binding for prone is C. But I'm pressing it and my guy won't lay down, so I'm getting kind of annoyed. And it turns out it's a hold binding that does not work if you tap it. And I do not have my prone on hold a button or hold to transition. I just have it as tap and you lay down. And on this game it wasn't doing it, so I was getting absolutely shit on just then, if you wonder why I'm stood around like DSP wondering what's happening and what day of the week it is. But this particular sequence as well, you do have cover from the helicopter, and you can use him to bring in all kinds of hellfire. I will be avoiding using the vehicles to do that because I want to shoot people. So there's a lot of sequences in this game where you can get cover from a tank, get cover from a chopper, get your team to help you out by marking them. and I'm going to just completely circumnavigate it in hopes of being able to shoot more people and make the footage a bit more interesting to watch. And the difficulty, as I mentioned, is it's not really too bad as long as you don't play like an absolute lunatic. One of the problems with Battlefield as a franchise is that it's still got a little bit of that, you know, that willfulness to be a military simulated game, even though it is clearly very arcadey still. And everything that goes into making this that milsim experience for some boomer dad who's getting flashbacks from his Medal of Honor PS1 days, it's the type of stuff that stops you from being as effective as you would like to be. And you're going to see it in this. You saw it just then. In most shooters that I cover, when I track an enemy like that, I put them down very quickly and concisely, and it doesn't take that long to kill them. You generally don't see me waste 30 rounds on one man moving. But that's because this game has a certain spread mechanic in it. This game penalises movement while you're shooting. This game penalises a lot of things to try and make it a bit more, shall we say, realistic. And this game also has a terrible mantling system that doesn't let you jump out the windows, which is one of those things that you forget. Because if you come from Battlefield 1 or Battlefield 5, the movement system on Frostbite Engine got a lot better and you can do a lot more dynamic interactions, whereas in this game, you just run up to the fucking window like a dickhead and you probably have to crouch jump or something to get through. So, if you ever see me running into a window like that and being a complete buffoon, it's simply because that's not a feature here. And the one area of the game, guys, that's really, really tedious for a guide maker and a player such as myself, is that the FOV settings, much like on Hardline, only affect the multiplayer. And I'd love to know what this is about, because, of course, in 2011, I think this came out, consoles were definitely still hitting quite hard. They were doing what they needed to do, they were doing fine. They were moving towards that transition between the new generations as well coming up, weren't they? Preparing for the new thing. Are you telling me that they couldn't have had a FOV slider in those consoles and still got the same levels of performance? Because I just don't really believe it. Especially when you bear in mind that a couple of years after this, Battlefield 1 comes out, and it's the most impressive looking Battlefield to date on console, and it has an FOV slider in the campaign. So I don't know if DICE just figured it out and they worked magic in the Matrix, but suffice it to say, I'm playing on an FOV right now which I just do not feel is conducive to being a good player. You don't feel alert, you don't feel like you can have the visibility that you need to constantly be able to acquire the next target. It feels incredibly limited. And if you're used to playing on this FOV because you come from console, it's all you've ever known, and for you it's fine and it's really, really useful and you're probably very capable. But to me, I'm used to a higher FOV, and on a higher FOV I can see more. But there is a trade-off here, guys, and this is one of the things that people don't seem to realise. And when I say people, I mean those people that you see on the internet that are constantly arguing about how much of an advantage PC has over console and why crossplay is fundamentally unfair. And they argue that you can see more, but what they don't realise is the more you can see, the smaller the targets appear. So you're losing ease of use when it comes to micro adjustments for a greater periphery vision. There is always a trade-off, guys, to these elements. You don't get anything for free. So this idea that high FOV is cheating, all that shows is how little you understand anything you're talking about. FOV is a preference. It can have a function, an objective effect on gameplay, but it has both a detriment as well as a benefit. And like all great things, it's in balance. There are a lot of people that don't mess with the FOV at all on PC and keep it quite limited because that's what they think is most efficient for them. Doesn't mean that's how it works, and it doesn't mean that's what you should do, but this wonderful and ignorant statement that FOV is cheating is one of those galaxy brain level comments from some dude that is around the water cooler at work talking about the next Call of Duty to his buddies, yet he'll barely ever play it. But this is the escape in Baku level. We've already got the gold assignment rating for getting our score, which is really nice. I'm going to try my best to get gold on all the levels, guys, but I can't honestly tell you if I did that, because I can't really remember. I do quite like the driving sections in this game. I think they move away from the Call of Duty Michael Bay explosions every 5 seconds, but there's still enough going on for them to be interesting, and if you don't put vehicles in Battlefield, a lot of purists will complain it's not Battlefield. So this is kind of the obligatory Battlefield moment, I guess. And there's a sequence coming up here where Irish gives you a grenade launcher and you have to shoot the helicopter, and I did it seemingly as I do it right now, but I failed, and it was a fail state, so be very careful. I don't know if you've got to be quick. I don't know if it hit wrong or it went a bit weird because of the frame rate, but I fired at this guy and I lost. So yeah, be careful. And there's a few instances as well for people who are interested in coming back to this. I'm currently playing this on, everything's on Ultra, which is not saying much, and you can get a nice solid 200 FPS on it. So this is the part with the grenade launcher. But what happens is if you play the campaign on a higher frame rate, there are certain parts of it that don't work very well. And it might not necessarily even be frame rate, it might just be the PC version. Because when I was going to cover this game a while back, just so I could put something on the channel, and when I went back to it, there's a section where you're swimming in an aircraft carrier or in some kind of frigate, and you can't go forward because the game just refuses to make your man go forward. So it's like the longest swim in history and you can never complete it. And I completely forgot that that was a thing that happens in this game. So when I came back to recording it, I got to that corridor and I couldn't go forward and swim again. Luckily, this time, I'm using Reaver Tuner, so I can mess around with the frame rate to see if I can, you know, make amends and make it work. And I dropped it to 60, and I still couldn't swim. And I dropped it to 30, and I could swim shitty, but still able to move a little bit, and I managed to get past it. And there's a section afterwards as well, where you get in a boat, and you're going back towards your ship. That was a sequence where the scripting of the game kept breaking, and I did it about 5 or 6 times, and I could never get the boat to open up and let me go inside. And I capped the frame rate on that section to 60 FPS, and it seemed to go through normally. So if you're ever having any issues, guys, or any oddities or any weird moments, and I had plenty when I was recording this, it could be just because you're playing the game on a frame rate it never perceived itself to be played on. Which I find fascinating, considering the multiplayer runs perfectly and doesn't have any of this oddities. But maybe the programming is what makes the campaign so unique. But this is Shanghai. We're in the big building. We're doing the big gunfight. We've just unlocked the FAMAS, which is one of the more famous weapons from Battlefield 4 with its 1000 RPM. One thing you'll notice too on this game is the reloads take forever. It's so funny to me how long you spend reloading. And there aren't many options for big magazines either outside of LMGs, and LMGs, they suffer from the spread the worst. And if you're wondering, guys, when it comes to shooting, if you want the best advantage in shooting, tap fire. Battlefield 4 is a game about tap firing. If you're close, it's not that bad because you can just go full auto and the bullets will get there and the spread won't bum you too much. But any kind of range, tapping is always the best way to do it. Hyper tapping, I think some people call it, which is one of the higher level mechanics if you play the multiplayer. Just getting into the habit of understanding how to recenter and when to press and when not to press. Oh, and that right there, flashbangs. Oh my god, I don't remember those. So, they throw flashbangs during the day, and it fucks you up. And you are blind for a very long time. It is super frustrating. One of the things I really like about Battlefield, though, when you're dying, you can tell how much you're dying, because you can see your HP. And I think something like that is really useful because it tells you whether or not you can afford to be aggressive. In something like Call of Duty, you get red screened and then your screen gets dark and then you die. So you can never tell if you're 1 bullet away from death or 2 bullets away from death. And sometimes you can overextend, sometimes you can be cowardly when you could have overextended. And ooh, that's another thing as well. You can wallbang small surfaces in this. So if somebody's hiding behind something, just test it. You never know, you might be able to hit it. And if you're making it so that you go to those ammo crates every time you're near them, you're always going to have ammunition. And if you don't, when you walk over an enemy body, it will give you a magazine for the current weapon that you're carrying. So use that to get your ammo back, or swap to their gun if you want to get a fresh start. And I do recommend swapping to different guns just to see what they're about. One of my biggest criticisms of this campaign is that you cannot change the attachments on the weapons seemingly. And if you can, I didn't find it. And I did try. So you're at the mercy of cobras and reflexes and iron sights and all kinds of things. This was lucky here too. If that guy had committed, then he would have killed me. But that leads us to my weapons of choice. So right now, ladies and gentlemen, this is a unique guide. I've never done anything like this, and you might be thinking, how the hell can that be, Chris? It's a first-person shooter, and you've already made a guide for this before on the channel. This sounds absurd. Well, I'm playing on a new mouse. The mouse is the Xtrify I forget the full name of it, but it's the Zeiss Rail. It's the Rocket Jump Ninja mouse that he's designed and Xtrify's put out. And I purchased this at Christmas. We're now midway into February, and it only just arrived thanks to the wonders of delayed shipping. But the thing with this mouse is, I don't know anything about it. So, usually I would have gone on the internet and I would have watched some videos and I would have looked up things and understood what's going on. But I don't have the internet. A storm came and knocked out the infrastructure in my area. So I'm currently a week and 3 days without the internet. And it's as fucking miserable as you might expect. So I can't find these quick answers, because it's just not the way my world works right now. I'm in my universe of my own imprisonment. So I'm currently playing, and this recording that you're watching, guys, I'm using a mouse I've just got, with a completely different shape than I'm used to. I'm on a DPI I couldn't tell you, on a sensitivity I do not know, playing a first-person shooter. And this was annoying as well. I wanted to shoot these guys coming down the rope like you do in most shooters, and I couldn't do it. Because the ropes were going nuts and the men were coming down areas they shouldn't have been. And I don't really know what that was about, but it was pretty funny. And there's the gold score for this level. But some information I can give you that's accurate, ladies and gentlemen, is the mousepad I'm using is the Endgame's Cordura pad, the MPC 450. And it is a very interesting pad that I've been using now for a week or two, and I'm really, really enjoying it. I didn't like it at first when I first got my hands on it, because Cordura it's like jeans. It's essentially the texture of jeans, I would imagine. So when you first put your arm on it, coming away from a very soft and a really nice and premier feeling pad, it felt a bit rough and annoying. It felt like, you know when you're cold and you've got jeans on and you can kind of feel that weird tactile sensory feeling? It was a little bit like that. And I'd heard, before I purchased it, that it was a really, really fast mouse pad. And I didn't find it fast at all. I just found it okay. I found it quite decent and easy for my playstyle. But having used it now a while, my hand doesn't notice anymore. I don't notice the texture on my wrist or my fingers or anything. And I've just kind of got to that point where it's just comfortable and it works. And you'll have to tell me what you think with the gameplay, guys, because on paper, everything in this walkthrough should be garbage because my setup is just not where it needs to be. But I do think that people really do overstate the importance of settings and of tools. I think there comes a point where if you're good at something, if you are good on mouse and keyboard, guys, you can be good on any mouse and any keyboard. And there's a lot of talk about muscle memory when it comes to aim, and I do think that there is a level of foundational muscle memory needed just to navigate a mouse, but I also think that people adhere to it way too strictly, like it's this one solution to fix every problem. And I just watch this video, guys. My aim in this is on the wrong sense. It's on the wrong DPI, which is a number you should never change. I don't know my measurements, which I normally know them down to the decibel, and I'm still being able to be effective and overcome this walkthrough. So it just goes to show, doesn't it, as much as it's nice to get what you want and to set everything up and to make everything special and unique and bespoke to you, if you have that foundational skill, you will perform on anything that is presented your way. That little setup there, guys, if you put those mines on that area, this tank can go another way, but he usually comes this way, and if he goes the other way, just retry. And then when he's dead, a second tank's going to turn up, and we're going to bum rush it, and we're going to stick some C4 on it. And I want you to go back and check the other walkthrough, guys. Go check my original walkthrough for this when I was pretty new to Battlefield and had no experience with anti-vehicle. I probably spent about 20 minutes on this sequence trying to solve it, because I respect the tanks like I would in a Call of Duty, where the tank would just kill me instantly. But this is not like that. And I've played a lot of Battlefield since then. A lot of Battlefield 5, a lot of Battlefield 1. You know, I've been balls deep in tanks, and I've soloed them, and you realise, don't you, in this game, that you are just as capable, if not more so capable, than those tanks. And there's no reason to respect them, so just run up to them, stick bombs on them, and get rid of them. And then here is the swimming sequence that breaks the game on PC. There was no reason to put this in the guide, but I wanted to be reminded that it existed so that I could warn people wanting to play this looking back for nostalgia. Because it's the corridor in this next room coming up that happens where you simply can't go forward, and it doesn't matter what you do, you will not swim down this corridor if you get it bad. And this is a such a frequent bug that it's on PC Gaming Wiki too. And I don't know what it recommends on there to fix it, because I can't access the internet and tell you. But if you see right now, I can't move. And my guy will not move forward. He's just... It's as if he's just rubber banding or incredibly colliding, and you have to mess around. So I just dropped the frame rate to 30, guys, and I went through, and it let me through. It still took a while. Still took like 3 to 4 minutes of swimming, but we got through that 10-second sequence. And the joys of a walkthrough is I can just remove it. But we're coming into the command station here, taking on some of the commandos. I'm using the FAMAS right now, and it's a beautiful gun. One of the cool things about this gun is that it fires so quickly that the intermittent and spotty hit detection, thanks to how many bullets the enemies take and to how the spread calculation works, that even if you put your red dot on people, you'll generally kill them. And when you're using the slower firing weapons, that's when you really feel the spread. That's when you really feel the deviation. And it can be a little frustrating. I personally do not like the gun mechanics and the shooting in Battlefield 4 not too much. I respect it, and I love watching montages of, you know, locker feeds, but fundamentally, I don't like the systems too much. But on top here, there's some wonderful effects going on. DICE were really, really showing off with some of the beautiful features that they had with this game. It makes me so crestfallen that the new Battlefield is a pile of shit, because this is an amazing game in many ways, even if it's not to my taste and it's not my favourite. You know, Battlefield 4 had got some real chops. It's got a multiplayer that's lasted a decade and people still cherish it. It's got a campaign that is, you know, surprisingly solid in the grand scheme of things. It's not the best, but it's very playable. And it looks like there was some love put into it. It looks expensive. Story's naff, but what can you do? You know, people are going to war. That's what it's always about. I run out of ammo on this sequence coming up too. There's a lot of bounce and a lot of recoil, which you're probably noticing as I use this. I think it's a SIG 556. I'm really curious, because you know when you think of the attachments in Battlefield 4, what do you think of? Because I know in Battlefield 3, isn't it like heavy barrel and stubby grip? Isn't that every attachment? That's all you want? Whereas in this game, I think there's a little bit more in this game. But it makes me really confused when you contemplate that we know in the multiplayer there is a menu and a suite that enables you to pick your weapon and pick your attachments. This is just video games, right? So they have the technology for this menu, they have the functionality coded into the game, and it's in the multiplayer. But you can't do it in the campaign. Why? Why do I have to suffer these pre-made setups that some Goombas put on these guns that I don't like? And it just seems so counterintuitive that they would have these systems, that they would make these things, and then they would lock them to the multiplayer alone. And I think we can all agree, Battlefield's emphasis has always been multiplayer, because that's where it comes from. The original Battlefield was a multiplayer game on PC. You know, it's an absolute classic, people adore it. I have no bullets right now, so I'm in a bit of a pickle. Luckily, that grenade gets rid of him. And I think there's only 1 or 2 guys left. I didn't realise I was so low on ammunition. I love this blur here as well. Usually you'll hear me lament blurs and just absolutely attack them because I don't see any point in ever not being able to see the screen. But every so often there is a blur that is just beautiful enough that really tickles my cinematic eye. And it's not quite Doom Eternal when you access the weapon wheel, but it's pretty goddamn delightful. And then the only thing left to do now is to jump into the sea, and then we can do some speedboating. And it's funny too because I've been out of the loop now for over a week, as I've mentioned. I'm really, really hungry to work because I can't, because my job is on the internet and everything I do is on the internet. My entire life, everything I enjoy, both recreationally and professionally, is on the fucking internet. So when you remove that, it puts you into a bit of a bind. And that's why I'm making this walkthrough. You know, no one's asking for Battlefield 4 as much as it's a fun dalliance. And I didn't really want to cover it, truth be told, guys, but beggars cannot be choosers. And I'm trying my best to stay busy and to be productive in an incredibly testing and annoying phase of early 2022. And this just so happens to be one of the outlets of release. And the other 2 that I tried didn't work. Because another thing that you don't realise when you're installing games is sometimes you need certain versions of certain softwares even to make them run. And if you don't have the internet, you can't quickly grab them and fix these problems. Hell, you don't even know what these problems are because you can't even check the areas on the internet that tell you what all the problems might be. So you're in this interesting bind of you really don't realise how much you use these services until they're stripped away from you by some wonderful acts of God. But this sequence, I usually don't like vehicle sections, and when this game came out, I was definitely in that shooter fatigue of every single game is a military shooter, and I've spent an eternity in boats and in choppers and in mounted guns and chest-high walls and laying down in brown fields. That's kind of gone away now, because shooters do not have the same precedence that they used to have, and you don't see them on the horizon at all times like you used to. So now shooters are sparing lighthouses in the middle of rough seas, and they definitely are beacons of hope and fun. And coming back to this section here, I really liked this. The sensitivity in the boat is horrible though. I did not change it. I just kind of thought, it's not that long, we'll put up with it, but it was definitely not right, not even close to being what would have been apropos. Fortunately, the gun on this vehicle is so strong that it really doesn't matter, because you kill things so quickly. And there goes the South China Sea Gold Assignment Medal. And we get the USAS, which is a shotgun that you'll never see me use. Although the shotguns in Battlefield 5 are... Battlefield 5, bloody hell. Although the shotguns in Battlefield 5 are ridiculous, but the shotguns in this game are pretty good, from what I've used. There's a prison sequence coming up in lockers where you get to use one. And it's... interesting segment, that, because I don't have any fondness for lockers, because I never played it. But that is the thing that people remember, isn't it? Those are the servers that stay alive, because people love that. And then we just have this helicopter to take out. And he goes down immediately, but it only gives us 100 points. Seems a bit of a robbery, doesn't it, scoring-wise? I wonder why that was. But once we drive into the centre here, it's going to transition to the next sequence. And I think we're fighting inside the boat, the aircraft carrier. Yeah, we are. Get to the bridge. And we're using single shot on the FAMAS here by accident, so I'm going to have to change that. I never use single shot, guys, or burst. I should, because it's a much cleverer system in Battlefield, but you know me, I like to hold the trigger and I like to shoot people. So I'm going to try and be stubborn and just hold that trigger and play in a way that is not conducive to victory. Especially with the FAMAS. The FAMAS has such recoil, it's really fun. It shakes everywhere. I don't know about you guys, if you get used to using a gun like this that shakes a lot, when you go back to a gun that doesn't shake, you feel like a laser beam. And that's one of the reasons I always recommend changing weapons and moving outside your comfort zone. Like, this was frustrating too. This is the M4. M4 doesn't have the worst irons, but I'm not a big fan of anything that has an aperture like that and a ring. If I could put a reflex on that, I would have, because it was a really fun gun to use. But unfortunately, they give you the iron and there's nothing you can do. Oh, this chopper, by the way, when he swings backwards, if you go in the other room, you can pick up this rocket launcher, and then you can shoot that and it'll end that sequence. This is the type of stuff that's getting trimmed out that you don't see, but it's not really that difficult. There's nobody who's on the internet right now having problems with this campaign. I'm just hoping that the footage that you're watching is entertaining enough that you don't feel like you're being robbed. Oh, and I get stuck here on my buddy because I can't get past him. And I'm not in cover. I'm trying to crawl, but I won't move because that dude is stood there like a fucking old oak. I wanted to shoot him then, but I couldn't. Dickhead. Fortunately, they didn't kill me. They should have. But that's kind of the story of this campaign. And that's why I will always say I think the COD campaigns are way harder than the Battlefield ones. Because the Battlefield ones are too fair. But that does lead to more fun gameplay, I think. Like, can you imagine doing what I'm doing right now in Call of Duty 4? Can you imagine doing this in Black Ops? You'd be dead in a frame. You can't do this type of thing. Because they're too accurate, there's too much view kick, and you die immediately. So, I do think that they definitely get my compliments in that one, because it lets you fight back. And if I were to make a first-person shooter, especially a campaign, there would be no view kick. Fucking view kick is retarded. That type of shit would be lame as hell. And I'd make it so that when you kill people, it heals you a little bit. So you can be aggressive and stay in the pocket. Oh, this is cool as well. I don't know why that knocked me down, but I did think that that was quite cinematic, so I kept it in. And then there's just a couple of dudes here. Be very careful pushing up from where I am. If you push up too far, there's a lot of enemies here, and they're all sneakily hid behind boxes, and they'll just kill you. They killed me about 2 or 3 times when I was trying to be aggressive. All I wanted to do was get really close so I could do some tasty aim moments and you know, work on a nice AI montage, but it turns out that's just not the way it's going to work. And then we have to take on some helicopters. Luckily, you can pretty much grab any of the wonderful explosives to help you do this. So I've got this unloaded rocket that I'm carrying. Is this the S'more? I don't remember the name of this guy. So he was going to drop some troops. You could have waited and killed the soldiers for extra score if you wanted to. But you get a nice solid 200 points for killing that chopper. And then there's one more that's going to turn up just over there. Now, I go for the Hail Mary, but I don't know if I get it. No, I missed it, unfortunately. And then we have to reload in shame, and then we take him out and we get 200 points for that one. And then I think there's one more guy behind us. Is it this one? Ooh, nearly. Oh wow, there's a couple. There you go, see you later, friend. But I'm out of... Oh no, I've got a Stinger on, good. So I think it's 2 Stinger rockets to take out this dude. Which the Stinger locks pretty quick in this, all considered. And there you go. Easy life. So, into the command station. If you slow that footage down right there, I find that really confusing. There's an explosion that happens in that room that kicks up a bunch of dirt and dust particles, and I couldn't see that armoured man. So when I shot the first guy and I flicked towards him, I was actually on target, but you couldn't see because the visibility was so low. And I don't really understand what blew up, or what kicked up that dirt. And those armoured guys can be a bit of a dickhead too, because if you don't know that they're armoured, and you shoot them and you think they're going to die, they don't. Because they've got helmets on that enable them to take a decent amount of damage. And this is another sequence, this is a new mission, this. On this particular section, you can tell the tank to do things. And it makes it way easier, because he just goes in there and starts clearing it with the force multiplier. However, I'm not going to do that, and this ends up being easily the most annoying level in the game. Whereas thematically, you know, it's in the middle of a typhoon. This is a really, really cool idea for a mission. You know, the visibility's bad, the wind is kicked up, it's very spectacle heavy, but it just ends up being kind of boring. There's a lot of moments of navigation and cars getting flung around and stuff. And then there's a sequence with a tank which I really didn't like, because the tank section is probably the hardest part of the game. The tank dies, I think, in 2 direct hits from a cannon, and you're taking on multiple tanks for some reason. But hey, that's Battlefield, isn't it? And you can do it on foot if you want to, but the checkpoints there weren't too great, so I got all the way to the end, died, and thought, yeah, I'm not doing that again. Nobody wants to work that hard, right? And we've got Irish giving it. There's some interesting performances in this as well. I think the voice acting in this game is great. I know that they did performance capture because they look like them, don't they? So I'm assuming that the actors also played the bodies too, which is cool. And of course, I think that the actor that played Irish has passed away, unfortunately. And he was in Battlefield 2042, which is even more, unfortunately. Because that game is a pile of dog shit compared to this one, and he was wasted in that game. But in this, they definitely go through a bit of an adventure, don't they? It's not quite the happy-go-lucky, silly, slappy nonsense of Bad Company, which I really enjoyed. The fact we haven't had a Bad Company 3 at this point is kind of frustrating, considering I think that is the most engaging of the Battlefield campaigns. Battlefield 3 is pretty good, but it's just it's a bootleg COD campaign, isn't it? It's Poundland COD. And it worked, and I enjoyed it, and I'll probably end up covering it if I can get my hands on it in my wonderful monastic punishment here. But I just think that Bad Company was the one where they could have taken that game somewhere, especially with the increase in technology. But apparently that is not meant to be just yet, even though I've heard several rumours that the people that made the game wanted to continue making them. It's just EA wouldn't greenlight it, as with most things. But there's a couple of games that I'm going to be bringing hopefully to YouTube for people to watch and to keep in the loop, to know that I'm not completely dead. In as much as this is the most time I've took away from the channel and took away from doing what I do in a very long time. And just so you know that it's not voluntarily, guys. You know, it's kind of frustrating actually that I am as motivated as I am right now. It's been a long time since I felt like this. And I'm excited, you know, it's a wonderful feeling to feel excited in what you do. And sometimes you get so deep in what you do that you just get to a point where you almost just put on this mask of it's what I've always done and it's what I always do, so I don't even see it anymore, I don't even acknowledge it, it just happens, it's natural, it's a response, I don't think about it, it's unthought, you know, it's just an autonomous function. Whereas, ever since, I think it was Halo Infinite, I have felt reinvigorated in as much that, you know, the channel's not growing massively, but it's still growing, and it's nice to see positive growth. And the videos themselves aren't doing insane, but they're doing insane compared to what they were doing last year when I was passionate about a game that nobody gave a fuck about. So it's a really, really nice feeling to have all of these things coming together and to see those metrics with those green arrows and see things going up and to see the effort being put in being reciprocated. It's a wonderful driving force. And that's one of the reasons why I've been able to, in the span of 1 month, do pretty much the same amount of projects as I did in half a year last year. And it's not because I was lazy last year, because I wasn't. It's because I was driven this year. And drive is such a modifier. Like last year was all about finding things to cover and always being disappointed and not being able to get anything I wanted to share. I must have downloaded more games that I tried to cover and then didn't cover than some people played that year. That was lucky, by the way, look at that. That guy could have easily killed me if he'd hit me, but couldn't hit me, too good. Just lay prone, guys, ultimate strategy. Somebody's behind us now, I don't know how, but there he is. Something I haven't mentioned because it's almost universal at this point, but the hit markers tell you when you kill people, of course, and then you do get the pop-up on the screen. If you ever see the red hit marker, it means the person you're shooting at is dead, and you can stop shooting. I would imagine most people know this, but just in case you don't, it's always good to be reminded. But I've pretty much destroyed my hard drive with all the stuff I downloaded to it, only to then immediately remove and then download something else. Because you can only write to those bad boys so many amount of times, and I think I've definitely lit that candle at both ends. And it's crazy too, because there are games I tried to cover last year that when I got the PC ports I was so disappointed with them, and I didn't think that they were anywhere near to the quality they should have been for me to cover them. And then because the year of gaming was so disappointing and everyone's expectations start to sank into the sea, that, you know, we were waiting on anything to come out to remind us why we play video games. So this year I've gone back and covered some of those games that weren't worth covering last year but now look like amazing masterpieces by comparison, and it just goes to show, doesn't it? It goes to show that all it takes is a couple of rough months in video games for those older games by contrast to really start looking appetizing. And I think it's disappointing, and I think it's quite sad that that's how it has to be, but video games is a living and breathing industry. It's up and down. This gun, by the way, a lot of bullets, a lot of spread. Like, look at this. How the fuck are these people alive, dude? Where are these bullets going? This is straight up Battlefield 1 before Battlefield 1 existed. Absolute murder simulator of nonsense. And the reason it's happening, guys, is because I'm holding the trigger. The game is punishing me for holding the trigger. On this gun, holding the trigger, you don't get punished to the same degree because it's a submachine gun and it's meant to be like that. But the LMGs, because they have such a huge amount of rounds, the spread conversion seems to be off the charts on those guns, and it's just miserable to use them unless you tap fire them. But this is the sequence with the tanks. This is probably the hardest part of the game. It's not that it's all that difficult, it's just, it's vehicles, and vehicles aren't that interesting to me personally. And you want to be really careful because that tank is so much better than your tank when it comes to blowing things up. I was thinking too, going back to the topic, you know, was it me that changed, or were the ports changing? Was it the perception of the ports that changed? And it was just simply frustration, you know? Frustration of not having anything to cover. Frustration of wanting to cover cool games, but being disappointed in the state that they're in. And then you finally get to that point where bad is not as bad as something seemingly worse. So bad starts looking almost good by contrast. And that's the power of comparison, isn't it? There's a lot of philosophical ramblings about why you shouldn't pay too much heed to comparison, because you can never truly be yourself if you're constantly comparing yourself to others. And I do think that there's a lot of credence to that, and it's wise and sage advice. But in the grand pantheon of video games, there just comes a point where you want to put something out, and that's the point that we're in right now, and that is the reason why we're talking over a Battlefield 4 video. And there's a few other games that I'd like to talk about that I'm trying to cover, but I don't want to get anybody's hopes up because I'm having difficulty. And it is really frustrating. Luckily, since I was able to get something to work on, because there was a decent chunk of time where I couldn't get anything, everything was going bad. But I managed to get a project, which you will see, which is a live walkthrough on something I've never covered on the channel before. And there's 3 installments of it. Each of them is about an hour and a half / an hour long. So 3 separate projects there to sink your teeth into. And even if you don't care about what the game is about, hopefully you'll be able to enjoy it, because it's just kind of a silly nostalgia trip for me, which I hope you look forward to. Then there's a project that I actually recorded before my internet went down, because I've been trying to stay ahead this year. And I had multiple projects recorded quite early, so that I had a bit of a fallback solution, which is looking a bit ironic now. And it was after I covered Alan Wake. I had both the DLCs recorded. I had this project that you've yet to see recorded and commentated and edited and ready to go. And then I did Condemned. So there was a point where I had 4 projects all ready to go before you'd even seen them, which I thought was pretty fucking awesome. And now I'm sitting on like a week and 3 days of inactivity because of factors. So swooping in now to try and redeem it. We've got 3 projects, this project, and then there's something I can do after this that I can definitely do, even though the FOV's kind of fucking me off. And then there's 2 projects that I'd really like to do, but one of them needs a new version of PhysX that I can't get access to without the internet, and then the other one just refuses to work, so I'm going to have to get creative with it. And it just goes to show how industrious you have to be when shit starts going wrong. So to give you an idea, right, of just the clusterfuck of this. So this game that I want is a game that I actually own. I own this game physically, but I ripped the disk drive out of my PC a decade ago, and I never replaced it because games are never on discs anymore, and why the fuck would you need to, right? So I have this game, I just can't install it. I could buy one of those portable disk drives. My dad mentioned that, which I thought was a nice suggestion, bless him, but it's one of those things where it's like, it wasn't that important at the time, you know? So, what are the alternatives? Well, we can go to a couple of places on the internet where we can grab these games, so we'll do that. Grab this game off a certain part of the internet, install it, doesn't work. All kinds of weird errors going on, no idea what's going on there. So, uninstall it, can't do that version. Can't do the disc version because of aforementioned disc tray woes. So, I'm sitting on this project to this game, where I have it tangibly in my hand but cannot access it, and I've got it from the internet in some decent places which I know work and I know are reputable, and they're not working for whatever reason. So you find yourself asking questions that you wouldn't normally ask, which is, well, what can I do to get around this? I could get on a different PC. I could install it to that PC, see if it works. That could work, right? So there's the idea of that. And then you try it on another person's PC, it doesn't work as well, so there's definitely something going on there. So you think, well, what else could I try here? So you think, oh, this has a disk tray. What if I took my portable hard drive, I stick the disk in this PC, and I install it from the disk to this hard drive, and boom, we can carry it across. And you know what's going to happen there, don't you? Depending on how old the game is, will depend on whether or not it needs to have the disk in to run, regardless of if it's installed. And then that leads you to the problem of you need then to have those features that you can do on PC that convince your computer there's a disk there when there's not. And there are a lot of games that do this, that give the impression of like a cloned disk drive. But they're online, you know? Or they're already in the files when you get some game from some shady place, so it's already done for you and you just have to click it and boom and bah. So there's all of these variables that you never think about because you don't need to. You know, you don't think about having an old version of PhysX. Well, if I need an old version of PhysX, it just grabs it from the internet and installs it and it's all good. But when there's no internet, it says, oh, we can't get that. And then you're like, oh, is that the problem why it's not running? Probably not, but in that moment you think it is because you can't think of anything else. And then, you know, trying to get one game to install to do something with turns into 3 days of theory crafting ridiculous jerry-rigged Darwin Award methods to try and get something to function that should function just by default, but doesn't because of the state of video games. And that's not even mentioning the worst part of all, which is I have about 5 games on my PC right now that I could be covering, that I could be playing recreationally, and I can't. Because they need the fucking internet. And this is where we get into the conversation that I have a lot recently, which is this idea that Game Pass is not good. Game Pass is fucking DRM. And everybody likes it. It's DRM masquerade as a beautiful woman. She's got the blowjob lips, she's got the hips that don't quit, but she's really just some demon that's going to eat you in your fucking sleep. Because you can't really play with her. You get the illusion of playing with her, but she's not attracted to you. She doesn't want to be with you. It's all just a dance. It's just a fabrication. And that's what Game Pass is. Because guess what happens, guys, when you don't have internet and you try and access Game Pass? It says, you can't access the app because you're not online. It's like, okay. And it goes, to fix this, go online to this fucking website on Microsoft and give yourself permission to use these apps offline. But how do you do that when you've got no internet? And you can't get online to do that. Why is that not a toggle offline? And the answer's simple, because these are not pro-consumer pieces of software. These apps are there to exploit, and that's what they do. If this was for you to have a good time and value for money and to be really, really good and accessible, that would already be the way it works. Because isn't it funny, right? Isn't it funny that these fucking apps don't let you use them offline unless you go into 9 subfolders and give it explicit permission to do so, yet by default, they auto-renew. So you only want 1 month of Game Pass, but unless you know when that's going to refresh, it immediately charges you for an extra month you didn't want. You didn't tell it to do that, it told itself. Isn't it funny that? And isn't it just a little bit interesting that this massive company that does nothing but devour money sets a fucking piece of software to automatically buy itself and repeat this monthly so that it constantly takes your fucking money regardless if you want it to or not, but it doesn't let you access it unless you have the internet. It doesn't work, does it? It doesn't make sense. And this is the issue. This is not a good service. It's an exploitative service that is predicated on several variables being right. And if any of those variables are off, you can't even use it. And you know the best part? I'm still paying for it. And this is where it gets really delicious, because I'm paying for a business class internet line that doesn't fucking work, and I'm paying for a Game Pass that I can't fucking use. I've not been in a good mood, guys, recently, as you can imagine. And this is what bugs me the most. Gaming didn't used to be like this. You know when I was younger, guys, you know when I got into video games? When that flame was first ignited and my passion for this medium erupted? You pressed a button and the game came on. Sure, it took 25 minutes because the technology wasn't there, but it didn't ask you for the internet. The internet didn't exist then. You pressed a button. You put a cartridge in. You put a cassette in. You put a disc in. You put a floppy disk in. You put all these words that some of you have never even heard of because you weren't alive then. And it worked. I mean, sometimes it crashed because it didn't always work. You know, a lot of it was just madness. Like there were some games, my dad was telling me the other day, which I didn't realise this because he remembers it differently, obviously. There was one game on the Commodore 64 that we had that whenever you played it, you couldn't use the phone because it jacked the phone line. I don't even think it was online. It just completely fucked your phone line. Like madness, right? But it's just crazy, and it's so frustrating. Because let's talk about Steam, shall we? Steam, right? Who likes Steam? No one, right? Nobody likes Steam. Steam was hated when it first came out because it didn't have the features and it was DRM and it was all these things and everybody thought it was bad. Now, Steam has got better, a lot more accessible, a lot more intuitive, and people like it a lot more. There's a lot more compliments that go towards Steam, and I compliment Steam now. I didn't used to. I never wanted Steam. I've resisted it for a long time. But you know when I try and boot a game on Steam, guys, when I don't have the internet, do you know what it does? It says, you don't have the internet. Do you want to start in offline mode? And I press yes, and guess what happens? It's this magical thing that happens, guys. The video game that I bought with my fucking money boots, and I get to play it. But this is where the additional irony comes in, you see. Because I only have one game on Steam right now. Because I've been using Game Pass. You know, that inferior system, that inferior service, that total DRM garbage that exploits people and does nothing good and is not free. This idea that Game Pass is games for free is insane. You don't own them, you will never own them, and when your internet goes, you can't even fucking play them. Steam is better than Game Pass in every conceivable way. It's more affordable, it's got better prices, and you can actually activate things and access things without the internet, which is a huge step towards being a much better system. And I just don't understand why consoles are this late to simple basic functionality. And the only person it's hurting right now is me, because I don't have the internet, and it's one of those things, isn't it? When you've got the internet, you don't really think about it, you don't think about what it's doing, you don't think about what you need, and everybody says the same thing, don't they? Because it's like the Don Matrick expression at E3, when people said, well, what about the people that don't have the internet? What will they do? Well, they can use a 360. They can use a 10-year-old console in the next console generation. That was a good idea, wasn't it, Dom? You fucking idiot. And it's just ugly. It's an ugly, bureaucratic dogshit section. And it goes to show what they really care about, which is, it's not about you having access to the products that you're paying for. It's not that you get to access these wonderful games that they've made to exploit you with. It's just them, without end. And it's disgusting. And I'm really mad at it at the moment. I've been playing Yu-Gi-Oh! On my Game Boy, guys. That's where it's got to, you know? The games I have on my PC, other than the ones that I've managed to grab in the interim here so I can work on them, like Battlefield 4, I got lucky with this because I took it to my dad's house. I took it with Doom Eternal for him to play because he was wanting some games, and I know he likes military shooters, he likes shooters in general. And then he got into Doom Eternal, and then he tried to play this and he found it fucking boring. And I understand. It is fucking boring compared to Doom Eternal, you know? That's just the way it is. So I've got my dad, you know, doing what he does best, which is just being an absolute stallion, an absolute god, playing Doom Eternal, which he's beat now. And then he's got this on his hard drive, so when I'm up there seeing my parents, it's like, oh my gosh, Battlefield 4, I was going to cover that once upon a time again on PC. That's a project I can do, that's a game I can play. There's no... Watch this, by the way, see that? This was weird as fuck. I don't know what that was. And by the way, when I touch this lever coming up, it's an animation and you're not invincible, and I died in it. But it gives you a checkpoint. So, yeah, don't do that. If anyone sees you as you're pressing that, they'll kill you as you do it. Not a good idea. But I kept that in the guide because I thought that was the dumbest thing. 4 or 5 moments when I played this on high FPS, weird shit like that happened. I don't know if it's the frames, I don't know if it's just serendipity, but I had some goofy shit happening. It was really, really odd. There's a section where you're driving, you know the second level with Irish in the car when you're driving through, like, Shanghai or wherever it was, and you go to that tower where you go up the tower and you're fighting those guys. On that segment, the car was driving, and a guy runs across the road, and we drove through him, and he went through the car. Just because. I don't know. I have no idea. I'm both distracted and annoyed. But it was very weird, and it did make me laugh. But that's how I managed to grab this game. Because at the moment I don't have anything on my hard drive that I can really cover, so I've been going to my folks' house. I've been picking up some games, bringing them back, and most of them have not worked. It's just the things you don't realise go wrong when the internet's there to fix them, you know? But there's a project after this, which I am quite looking forward to playing, even though I'm not in the mood for it. I'll get in the mood for it when I play it, I know that. And that's something I know that people want to watch because it's a cool game. It's a game people have been asking for a while too, because I did the sequel. So a little bit of a hint there. I know that's not the biggest hint because I've done plenty of sequels. But it's irritating, guys. It's so irritating. I must say, though, right now, I'm in a much better place because I get to work. And it's one of those weird things. You know, most people If you were to say you can't work today, other than the financial aspect of that, most people would celebrate, wouldn't they? They'd rejoice. It's like when you went to school. You went to school and they sent you home. And everyone's like, oh my god, no school today. Fuck yes, let's play video games or whatever it is that you did. Isn't it interesting how you felt? Can you remember how you felt? It was such a good feeling, wasn't it? Oh my god, I don't have to be chained and shackled to this place I don't want to be. It's a great feeling, right? I don't feel like that with my job, guys. You know, I love what I do. You know, there's aspects of the job that I really dislike, and there's aspects of it that are really, really frustrating. But fundamentally, I get to do one of the best things I've ever done. And I get to do that every day I choose to. And there's times when I'm not at my best, and there's times when I don't do it very well. But there's times when I do. You know, and the effect that it has on both me and the people that I interact with is huge. Because as frustrated as I am right now, I know that there are people in my community who every day show up and hang out and take part and are part of something bigger than themselves. And they don't get that right now. They have to go somewhere else, and hopefully they've found a nice replacement for a while to ease the suffering. But they're probably just as eager to get back to what it was as I am, and just as frustrated that it's not there, because you take things for granted. You don't realize just how much something means and just how much something is used until you can't touch it anymore. You know, it's that wonderful bittersweet reality, isn't it, of a lot of things. It's like the idea of loss and losing something. Losing only stings when you've won. If you always lose, it's just reality, it's just the norm, it's solemnized into the point of absolute meaninglessness, sorry. But if you've won, and if you've tasted that victory, and you know what it feels like to be on the other side of that decision, then losing gets a lot more painful, and a lot more fearful. That's why kids are fearless. That's why kids can do so many crazy things, and you did crazy things when you were younger because you didn't learn the fear yet. You didn't learn the repercussions of things. You looked at something and you thought, wow, that's cool, I want to do it. Look at that tree, look how tall that tree is, I want to climb it. I wonder what's at the top of that tree. I wonder how cool it'll be to get to the top of that tree. Whereas a little while later, when the fear creeps in and reality hits home and gravity says, oi dickhead, that thought of, wow, I wonder what the top canopy of that tree's like, turns into, wow, I think I'd die if I fell from that. I think if I got my leg caught there and I swooped down, I'd be impaled on those 3 branches. I think that brick there is where my head would land if one of those branches snapped under my weight and I came sailing down. Because reality changes your perceptions. Like, when was the last time you hurt yourself, remember? You hurt yourself, what's the first thing you do? You think about all the times you've done stupid shit in your life and you wonder, how the fuck am I alive? How the hell did I not really, really hurt myself when I did this stupid, innocuous bullshit thing and it broke something? Yet when I fell down the stairs, or when I fell over this, or when I got hit by that, or when I did that stupid thing, I just bounced back. Bounced back, easy life, no damage, no bother. And you start second-guessing it, don't you? It's where the expression getting back on the horse comes from. This idea of a trauma that haunts you, and the only way to face that trauma is to literally face it and to repeat it, and to go back to where it happened, and to see if you can overcome those demons that are haunting your expectations. But I'm making a little list of all the things I'm going to do when I get the internet back, because I don't want to take it for granted, you know? I want to do all the things that I've thought about, because I find myself, and I know you do too, because I think it's just a human element, I always find myself, whenever I've been doing something, like I'll look at the same websites, you know? I'll go to the same 6 or 7 websites I check every day, maybe 3 times a day or whatever it is, that routine, that ritual of, oh, I'll check this, and you do that, don't you, where you even go to check it, even though you've checked it like 15 minutes before, and there's nothing new, and there was nothing new the previous time you checked it, but you do it because it's one of those habitual, conditional things you do. And then you always think, don't you, like, I wish there was something else I could be looking at, and I wish I'd spend my time better. There's the Kunlun Mountains gold assignment, though. That gets us the CZ Scorpion Evo. Or CZ, however you want to say that. And then when you're away from the computer, or away from the device, you come up with all these fascinating things you could do, don't you? oh wow, I could look into this, and I could grab some images for that, or I could design this, or I can do that. And you get a million ideas a second when you have no way of acting on them. That was dirty, just getting flanked by that little bitch. So you've gone from checking the same 6 websites repeatedly ad nauseum and seeing nothing new, to immediately now you're a scholar of good ideas. You're this wellspring of just fascinating tangents. And you're like, oh my god, I'm going to do all these things when I go back upstairs. You know, once I finish eating, or once I finish this TV show, or whatever it is you're doing. And then what do you do, guys? When you get back to your computer, or when you get back to that device, or you turn that phone on, what's the first thing you do? You go back to those 6 fucking websites you checked before, and nothing's changed. All of those ideas you had of all those fascinating Google searches and wonderful internet adventures, they've all evaporated as if they never existed to begin with. They've just slipped into this illusory pocket of your brain. And it's really annoying, because you remember, don't you? You go, oh, what was those things I was going to look for? There was a bunch of shit, it was really cool. I was going to do this, I was going to grab that, I was going to check this, I was going to tweet this. All gone. Haunting. Just haunting in the echoes of your brain. Mocking you silently from the vestiges of unreclaimed memories. And that's what it is. And it's fucking annoying, and we all do it, I think. Unless it's just the way my brain works. So that's why I'm doing a list. Because I'm going to check that list like fucking Santa would. It's going to be militant Santa mode. And I'm going to do all the things I put on that list first. Just so that I can say, yes, I ticked off all these things that I've been eclectically thinking about that have almost no meaning to anybody but me in that immediate moment. And I think it's going to be a really satisfying resolution when that happens, but unfortunately it could be a while now. We've got to dig in for winter and batten down the hatches. This is a G36 as well, and I don't quite mind this iron too much as it's one of the irons I despise. I don't like any kind of aperture or any kind of sight to peep through. But this is big enough because of how bulky the gun model is that you can make it work. There's also a moment of complete fortune coming up here too. I get into a gunfight on a bridge with no cover, and I think blowing up a barrel is going to kill everybody, and it doesn't. And then I have no bullets and don't really realise, and I aid strafe into surviving a situation where I should have died. It was not good. And I thought I was dead, so I just thought, oh, I'll die, I'll retry, and I'll be able to do this all again, but I didn't die. And you get to see the madness of what the hell was going on, because I honestly couldn't tell you how I survived. I had almost certainly given up on getting out of it. And that's one of the weird things about making a walkthrough, you know, when the gameplay's not going your way or it's not as good as you'd like, you can always fall back on the idea of just re-recording it. But then the time when you don't die, you can't re-record it, you know, it's already out there. Oh, you could if you wanted to, but then that leads into the grounds of going in and doing re-recordings, which I really don't like doing that as much as it does make for cleaner and better gameplay. Because it's like being an editor, isn't it? It's about language. There comes a point when you edit something, when do you stop? When do you draw the line? When is it enough? And that's the problem with it. If you give yourself this free reign to constantly tweak and adjust, you'll spend the rest of your time with that work constantly tweaking and adjusting and never letting it be. And then it leads into the territory of over-editing. You can turn a good idea into a garbage idea just by constantly, repeatedly iterating on it. You can strip mine it of everything that made it interesting, sporadic and different and spontaneous, and turn it into something formulaic, tired and rote, just by sheer repetition and reinvention. And it happens a lot. Sometimes those first ideas you have are so counterintuitive to how you normally think that they're the boldest ideas you'll have. And sometimes they need refining, you know, they need drawing in or pushing out or whatever it is that needs to do to make it shine. But if you buff it too much, it loses its luster, and it's so easy to do. And this is the part, here, watch this. So, the spawn here is a bit dirty, bunch of guys. I shoot that barrel, and then no one dies. And then I'm in a really bad place. And I run out of bullets here, I've got one bullet in my clip, look at this, look at this. Look at this. What is going on? How did I do that? Magic, right? Jesus. But, entertaining though, I think. One of the games I really wanted to cover, and I've been wanting to cover this a while, is Resident Evil Remake 3. I promised when I made that guide that I would do Nightmare mode after Inferno, and I forgot to do it. And I want to go back and do that. And I want to make it fun too. I want to make it really dumb, really fun. And I've got some good ideas. Unfortunately, the night I was going to download it, I thought, oh, I'll do it tomorrow. And then my internet went out. And I couldn't find any nod, wink versions of that game to try and test it to see if I could get it running. And it's pretty frustrating that, because I was on the cusp of doing it. And I know that that's a project that people are going to enjoy, because Resident Evil always does well on my channel, and Resident Evil's a cool game that people like to watch. And admittedly, it's, you know, it's not exactly on everybody's radar right now, but I think that's a pro. I think that's an advantage, because you get to see something that you weren't expecting. And that's one of the cool things right now, I think, with the projects going on the channel. There's a lot of stuff that's just coming out of left field. Like, I don't think many people were expecting Condemned. Sloth expected it, because the sneaky bastard mentioned Condemned when I was already making the guide. And it was one of those things where it was like, ah, you little genius. The Nostradamus Sloth coming in handy there. And he asked me on stream if I'd ever thought about making a guide for it. And it was like, nah, you know, what would be the point? I kind of blew him off. Because he'd already guessed it, the cheeky bugger. But for the most, it's kind of been all over the place, hasn't it? With it. Mirror's Edge, I think, was kind of out of left field. Nobody expected that. If you would ask me about Mirror's Edge, I would be very critical of that game, because it's a game that annoys the fuck out of me, even though I do love it. So I think that one was kind of a bit of a surprise, and it was nice to see all the people that came out and said, wow, we really like Mirror's Edge. It's such an underappreciated game, and it is, in many ways. And then Hardline turned up, and Hardline is a good game, but I don't think anybody really cares too much about Hardline. I had fun with it, and hopefully I made a good project, and you could have checked that out. And then Alan Wake was the one that... Alan Wake was almost fated, wasn't it? And the remaster came out, and I couldn't do much with it because the PC port was bad. And then the original version seemed to be pretty damn good and worked almost immediately. I only had to tweak it a little bit. So that was really sweet. And Alan Wake in general is just one of those games, isn't it? It's a game that seems to have such a fondness surrounding it. Which, when it first came out, Alan Wake was all over the place with the reviews. So for me, I spent a lot of time saying that I really like Alan Wake. You know, I think it's a great game. And I heard a lot of people critiquing it and criticising it. And the think tank now, looking back, seems to be a lot more positive than I remember it being in many ways, which is interesting. But that got a good reception. I don't know if it's just because it's Alan Wake or because it was no damage to using the handgun, which is such a ridiculous idea on paper, but turned out to be quite fun. And then the DLCs didn't do too well, but at that point you just watch an entire walkthrough for Alan Wake and you're going to get exhausted, aren't you? It's too much Alan Wake. And there's also the aspect of that where I couldn't quite finish those challenge runs, which was lame. But the gameplay therein, before those moments, I think was really interesting and entertaining. Because some of the stuff you have to do to win in that DLC is pretty brutal. You'll have to try it to see what it's like, because it might surprise you. And then Condemned. I haven't been able to check how Condemned's doing, which is really frustrating. Because it was doing really well on the first 2 days or whatever when I put it up. And I was really proud of that video. I had a really good time making it. There was a ton of little things that went into it that you might not have even noticed, but there's something interesting about iterating and reiterating and doing the same thing differently multiple times. And it's hard to explain unless you're an editor yourself. But there comes a point where almost everything you do in editing is so workmanlike and workhorse ready that there's no real space for expression. And where the expression is, it's so subtle that only real editors are going to spot it. And it's one of those interesting things. It's the idea of making a piece of art that has a nuance in it that only other artists will notice. And as much as I really like the restricting factor of having something that only 3 guys on the planet are going to see, the rest of the people that experience it are missing out on something that's core to the experience, you know? The good news now is your phone can do half the shit I learnt at university. You press one button and you do something that took me weeks to learn and years to master. So there's always that side of it, isn't there? Where I do think people's media awareness and people's understanding of, especially just like the smaller aspects of any kind of production or any kind of creation, people know about it now. There's a lot more information, isn't there? A lot more awareness because people are seeking it out. And when it comes to making these walkthroughs, the editing in most of my walkthroughs is as I said, it is very workmanlike. Removing deaths, removing load screens, removing cutscenes. You know, that's the foundation of the beginning of my editing style. Removing downtime where the player is not in control. That was the beginning, wasn't it? I did that for a long time. Not a lot of flexibility in that. Once you get good at recognizing what needs to be done and what needs to be culled and what needs to remain. And then we move forward again. And we move into the idea of, I'm going to trim out downtime and slow moments that do nothing but essentially frustrate me on the commentary. And yourself, because why do you want to watch me walk down a corridor with nothing happening for 2.5 minutes? So then you move into this idea of excising more and more and more. And then you start really cutting into things that are more of a judgment call than an actual science. It's easy to remove a cutscene because everybody agrees on what a cutscene is. But when it's not a cutscene, then it moves into that territory of being a lot more ambiguous. So what comes and what stays, you know? And that's where people start to disagree too. And when someone disagrees on something, it knows you're hitting on something interesting because it's divergent in its meaning. And then you get to where we are now, which is, I've always kind of done this editing style, I just haven't done it as aggressively. And because the format on YouTube has shifted, we've gone from multiple videos to one continuous video, it's changed how I approach certain aspects of it. And it's led to a renewed vigour for editing. And here's the thing, right? That's not to say that I didn't have vigour in my editing before, and it's not to say that I didn't enjoy it, but I'm actively looking forward to it now. And I'm excited at the prospect of how I can play with it. And I think that that is something so useful and important. Because no matter what you do, whatever your main calling is, the thing you spend the most time doing, if you can twist and tweak it and alter it to make it more enjoyable, to bring something out of it that brings something out of you, if you can be successful and you can get that working and happening for you, it does the work for you. Because when you want to do something, that's when the special things happen. That's when the great things happen. It's hard to have some majestic 1 in a million moment happen on something you don't want to do. And we spend so much of our lives doing things we don't want to do. You know, so much of our waking moments are spent at the service of something by choice we would avoid. And it's the same with a creative endeavour. You can't just snap your fingers and be creative. You can't just roll a dice. Oh, you rolled a 4, time to be creative. It doesn't work that way. Some people are going to be more creative than others. Some people are going to be inspired in certain ways, and some people are going to be demotivated in certain ways. And the one resounding factor is you have to find that balance for yourself, and you have to understand it. And the more you expose to it, the more you start to move to that cadence and get into that pocket. And when you get there and when you do find it, that's where the magic happens. And that's where I am at the moment with the union of projects and the union of editing. And it doesn't sound like much, and it you know, it might be completely uninteresting to you. You might think it's nonsense and fluff and nonsensical, and it could be. But to me it means a lot, because I do a lot of editing, and editing is the unseen and unsung hero of all production work. Because nobody watches any really, really awesome movie and goes, oh wow, that editing was great. Nobody says that. It's like one guy that says that, and he's in the comments right now angrily typing because he does, and I love him for that, but I'm going to ignore him. But it's just the truth, you know? Unless you have an interest in the area that we're talking about, the average viewer is going to see the superficial elements that most viewers see. They're going to see the actors, the leads. They're going to see potentially the director if they're a little bit more experienced or a little bit more interested in the medium. They're going to see people that might not have even contributed fully to what made it so enjoyable, but they're the people who are in charge, and thus they're the names that get touted. And you see that in everything, don't you? It's just the nature of the beast. But most people aren't going to say, you know, that was fantastic editing, I love that editing, because unless they're an editor, they don't know what they're looking for, and even if they think they do, they might not be looking at the thing that resonates with you. And there's a decent amount of people in my community that do spot a lot of the subtle stuff with the edits, a lot of the smaller things, the adjustments, and I really appreciate that, because that's the stuff that excites me, you know. But that doesn't mean that you can't appreciate everything, because the people that just watch it and enjoy the gameplay, that's awesome. The people that watch it enjoy the discussion, you know. Some people use these as a podcast, and I understand that completely. It's something I've done myself. It's something I was inspired to do by the people that inspired me. The people that were my initial motivation. And I reached out to those people recently, and they ignored me, which is unfortunate, because I was going to do a kind of an anniversary special video about where I interviewed the people who essentially trailblazed before me, the first people I saw doing this, and I wanted to get their impressions and their thoughts on how the medium had moved and how it had advanced and how it had changed. This level here, by the way, guys, if you carry this grenade launcher, you can get rid of a lot of the vehicles. Not only does it give you a huge point bonus right there, the 1100 points on the kill, but it will also stop some of these sequences from being too long. There's a really stupid Scooby-Doo moment coming up, though, where there's a guy on a mounted gun on a roof, and the priority in the AI for that mounted gun must be so much higher than every other action that, like lemmings, they repeatedly run up a staircase to get to it and die on it. And it starts off as just, I don't want a guy on this gun, he's dangerous, and it turns into shooting fish in a stupid barrel. It's really dumb. I think you can probably stealth a ton of this if you want to, but we're here to shoot, we're here to do some battlefield, and we're going to turn this into a battlefield, and we're going to slay as best as we can. But I was quite excited to talk to those guys, because they were doing a lot of what I've done before I was doing it. And they were doing it at a time where the internet was different, and where YouTube was different, and where standards were different. And they went on to change and move direction and move and try and catch that, you know, take that wave and ride it into whatever the new epoch was going to be, the new century. And they're not around now, because such is the transience of this medium. And I would have loved to have got just some thoughts and some observations on how they feel looking back, how they felt that it went, and what they thought they did well, what they thought they didn't do so well, you know. Were they on that cusp, or were they behind it? Did they find that fringe, or were they, you know, were they just lost in the shuffle like many are? And I think it would have been a really good conversation. But alas, they didn't respond. And it's just the internet, isn't it? Maybe they have responded and I can't fucking see them because I have no internet. Who knows? Maybe they think I'm being an ignorant arsehole not responding back. It could have got to that point. But it would have... I think it would have been a really, really cool project to do. I get very reflective at times, guys. It's just the nature of the person I am. I analyse things. I think about things. I've always had a profound impulse and adoration for the metaphysical aspects of this wonderful experience we're all sharing. And I think that would have been a nice opportunity to see it from a different angle. And the best way to look at anything when you've been looking at it for too long is from a new or more oblique angle. But we're moving forward now to destroy a dam. We're currently using the HK-416, which is one of the signature weapons of Battlefield. I think it's the signature weapon of Bad Company, isn't it? You see that weapon a lot. It's pretty good. It's got a decent amount of recoil, decent fire rate, decent mag and whatnot. I think it's rocking a Cobra, which I'm not the biggest fan of the Cobra. I don't like the Cobra sight. I don't really know why those guys just crouch in the open like that. Seems kind of odd. And the other gun I'm using, if you're wondering, guys, is an MX-4 Storm, which is a really, really cool submachine gun that you don't see in many games. So whenever I see it, I try to use it. And there's the gold assignment medal for Tashgar, which is the level that we're on. And we got it way sooner than I thought we would too. There's quite a decent amount of fighting on this level, and there's a really goofy spawn coming up, which I thought was quite fun. I'd love the score system in this to be more in-depth, and it'd be really nice if there was a mode with no cutscenes and none of the nonsense so you could focus on doing the scoring. Because just this small inclusion of a score system, as basic and as bare bones as it is really fun. Like, I think that this game does a lot of interesting stuff that I don't even know if I gave it that much credit for when I first played, but I'm definitely looking at it with fresh eyes, and I'm glad I am. And I hope you doing so as well. Watch this though, right? I kill that guy, I come over here, no one's here, I can't go to this elevator because it's scripted off of my companions, so I walk back out, they move forward, and then all of a sudden there's like 4 commandos all near that elevator. And the elevator does come up even though it's already up, which is weird. So if you watch... So elevator comes up, but these people are already here. Did you see that? They didn't come out the elevator, they just phased into the arena. It was a very strange spawn. And I nearly died too, which would have sucked. But there you go, friends. See you later. But there's quite a lot of things I'd like to do in this moment when I've got time, because it's what you find, isn't it? Let's talk about some upsides. You've heard me do the woe is me. You've heard me play the violin. Not having the internet sucks balls. We all know this. You know, it's not a difficult branch to go out onto, is it? The idea that everything you normally do, you can't fucking do. It sucks. But let's just push that aside and let's talk about the stuff that you can do. So one of the biggest problems with getting into that loop of streaming, doing YouTube videos, is it can be all-encompassing. It can completely override your brain and stop you from being alive and awake in the moment anywhere else, because you're too busy thinking, you're too busy scripting, you're too busy trying to make a million things. And then even then, when you're in that flux of all those elements, there comes times where you'd like to do something else, but you can't fit it in because you're already fitting everything else in, and you're just too deep. So being away from it has enabled me to kind of look at it from a different perspective too. Looking into stuff like, I would have liked to have designed some emotes right now that I've been thinking about for a while to add to the channel. But the problem is the images are all on the internet and I don't have access to that, so I'd have to get fancy with some replacement temporary internet solutions, which is what I'm currently looking into. I won't be able to stream on it, and I probably won't upload on it or even watch videos on it, but I will be able to, you know, grab images, look at websites and things, and actually be connected to planet Earth for a single moment maybe. But then things like, I've wrote a few scripts for some videos. I've done another short script on a review for a Razer Gigantus V2 mousepad, so all I need to do with that is get the footage, you know, get some stuff off the internet, and then record it, and there'll be another one of those silly skits up that people seem to be quite enjoying. So that's cool, being able to do that. I could write some other script-based videos, like I could do a review, I could do some kind of top 5 or something. There's a lot of aspects like that I can look into. And then there's things like alerts and the stuff on the backside that you don't really think about, you don't talk about too much, but makes things a lot better when it's there. One thing I am doing, guys, is I've got that camera and I have charged it, and I'm going to be opening one of those boxes and doing a kind of vlog with it. There are difficulties in doing that, as much as this sounds like excuses, and I don't mean to make excuses for myself here, but getting it to connect and to record in the right format, in the right medium, in the right space is a dance I have yet to fully learn. But the camera's there, I've got it calibrated, I know how to use it, and I found everything I'll need to do some of the filming. It's just finding a part of my house that's appropriate, that doesn't look like complete dog shit, and being able to be appropriately close to an area where I can record to, because it doesn't have an SSD card, and I don't think I have an SSD card, so it's going to have to be hardwired into a PC. And this might mean moving my PC, it might mean getting creative with my girlfriend's laptop. There is plans to be made, but fortunately I have time, so you'll hopefully see that. And one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go through my Yu-Gi-Oh cards too. I've been playing a decent amount of Yu-Gi-Oh at the moment on Game Boy, and I've had these cards for like 20 years. I've not seen them in a while. They're all jumbled up and they're not in any kind of respectable state right now, outside of, you know, they're in good condition and they're safe. But the last time I used them, there's the Suez bronze, by the way. Last time I used them was when I was playing with my cousins when they were young kids. My cousins are now all essentially working and at university with partners and lives and ambitions and things. So it's just fascinating, isn't it, to think that the last time that I messed with those cards, they were kids. That's how fast life travels, guys. That's how the world continues to spin regardless of whether or not you're paying attention. And I want to go through them just to touch them again and show them off. And I know there's a decent amount of people in my community that like Yu-Gi-Oh! So it might be cool to see some of that stuff. And it's just something to stay busy and to feel like I'm working when I can't work, which is really, really important to me. Interesting! I got the ACE! I didn't realise that. ACE 52CQB, and I didn't put it on. That's really frustrating. Damn. And we got the gold on Suez. That's good. That means I could have been rocking that, but instead I rocked the PDW, and the PDW came with a built-in holographic, and I don't like the holographic sight. It irritates me. That guy there's armoured, by the way. He's dead, but I didn't think he was dead, so I wait here to regen before I push him, and he's already on the ground. You won't see it, though, because I transitioned it out. But this is the final mission of the game here, guys. It's got a really, really odd ending, too. And I think I remember this on my original guide, because I think I sniped on this entire level. I discovered that the sniping had really, really strong aim assist, and it felt really powerful, so I just sniped and quick-scoped the shit out of everybody. I'll have to go back and check it out to see if it's anywhere near as accurate as my memory seems to think it is. Because I keep getting it confused with Battlefield 3. I don't really remember Battlefield 3 outside of it got EA content ID'd on YouTube when I put it up. And it's got that speech, hasn't it, where we're two soldiers and the music's playing and it's really epic, and he's on about how if you shoot him, you stop all the bad things and whatnot. That's all I remember. And the train at the start, and it's got some like interactive COD moments. That's pretty much it all. Look at these guys flanking me as well. Look at that flashbang. Whenever you get flash, guys, if you lay down, the enemies have a much more difficult time hitting you, and you'll probably survive. But no one's having problems with this game on hard mode. This game could have done with an extra difficulty. I think it could have been way harder than this. And I still think it would have been fine, too. They could have made it so that you die in 3 bullets or something, and you would have been okay. That's one of the things I'd love to do. If I could go in and mod games, mod difficulties, mod enemy placements, mod variables and statistics and stuff. I hope in the future that kind of stuff becomes as easy to do as turning your face into like a dog face on a mobile phone. You know how all these filters exist now that do these things that will take you weeks in After Effects to like calibrate? Whereas now you press a button and you've got ears and a big tongue and a goofy face. Like, I want games to get to a point where we can modify their source code and their assets with that kind of ease of use. I want some RPG Maker 2030 edition, you know, because I think that would just be sublime. Anyhow, ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of the guide. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you when the internet comes home. You take care now.